the twin sons of Thalera cast golden light across the grand city of Sarath. Towers of crystal rose into the sky, shining with colors that shifted as the suns moved. The streets were filled with people, but the air was heavy, not with joy, but with silence. Every citizen had been ordered to gather in the great square, for today a princess would face judgment. Princess Elora stood on a high platform, her hands bound with silver bands that glowed faintly. The bands drained her strength, preventing her from using the gifts her family carried in their bloodline. She tried to keep her head high, her long pale hair falling over her shoulders, but her heart was heavy. Around her, the counselors in their tall dark robes watched with cold eyes. They were the ones who had accused her of treason. She was not guilty. She knew it. The people knew it. Yet none spoke for her. The council was powerful, and fear kept every voice silent. The charge was clear. Elora had refused to marry the warlord chosen by the council, a union meant to strengthen their rule. She had argued that her people deserved peace, not endless alliances that dragged Thalera into conflict. Her refusal was taken as rebellion, and rebellion against the council was punished with death. The council leader, a tall figure with a silver mask, raised his hand. His voice was deep and echoed through the square. Princess Elora, you are accused of betrayal against the council of Thalera. You are sentenced to death before the eyes of your people. Do you deny your crime? Elora's voice was steady though her chest burned. I deny it. I have loved my people all my life. My only crime is to refuse the chains you call alliance. If that is betrayal, then I stand guilty of loving freedom. The crowd shifted. Some lowered their heads, afraid to show agreement, while others stared at her with hidden admiration. But none dared to speak. Soldiers lined the square with long crystal spears, ready to strike at any who resisted. From the edge of the crowd, one pair of eyes watched with growing anger. Daniel, a human traveler, stood among the silent aliens. His ship had crashed months ago on the far side of the planet, leaving him stranded. He had wandered until he reached Sarath, hoping for trade or repairs. Instead, he found a city locked by fear, ruled by a council that acted like masters rather than servants of the people. When Daniel had first heard of the trial, he thought it was another display of power. But as he listened, he understood it was more than that. This was not justice. It was a public execution meant to crush hope. And the victim was not only a princess but a symbol. He clenched his fists. He was only one man, with nothing but a few tools from his damaged ship hidden in his pack. Yet as he looked at Elora, standing proud even as she faced death, something stirred inside him. He could not walk away. The council leader raised his hand again. Prepare the blade. A guard stepped forward, holding a long shard of crystal that pulsed with red light. The weapon was ancient, used for ceremonial deaths. The square grew even more silent. Elora closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. She would not give her enemies the pleasure of seeing her break. Daniel's heart pounded. He scanned the platform. The guards were armed but their attention was on the crowd. No one expected resistance. Why would they? No one had ever defied the council in the open square. He slipped a small device from his pack, a tool meant to cut through ship panels. It could not last long, but it could burn through almost anything. He hid it in his sleeve and pushed forward through the crowd. No one stopped him. No one even noticed him at first. As the guard lifted the crystal blade above the princess, Daniel acted. He rushed forward, leaping onto the platform with a shout. The crowd gasped as one. The counselors rose in anger. The guard swung the blade down, but Daniel caught his wrist, the small cutter flashing in his hand. The crystal split with a hiss, breaking into glowing fragments. "Run!" Daniel shouted at Elora. She stared at him, stunned. A human. No one had expected this. Yet in that heartbeat of shock, he cut through her silver bands. The glow faded, and her strength returned. The guards closed in. Daniel grabbed one of the fallen spears and swung it wildly, forcing them back. He was not skilled, but he was desperate. Elora, her blood rushing with new energy, raised her hands. A wave of light burst from her palms, pushing the nearest soldiers to the ground. The square erupted. The people cried out, some in fear, some in sudden hope. For the first time in years, someone had defied the council openly. Daniel pulled Elora toward the edge of the platform. "We need to move now." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. Together they leapt down into the crowd. The citizens parted, shocked by the sight of their princess running with a human. Guards shouted and gave chase, but confusion spread. The people no longer stood silent. Some blocked the path of the soldiers, pretending to stumble. Others whispered the name of the princess as if awakening from a long sleep. Daniel and Elora dashed into the narrow streets beyond the square. The city of Sereth was vast, filled with bridges of glass and alleys of stone. They did not know where safety lay, but they knew the council would not stop until both of them were captured. Behind them, the council leader stood on the broken platform, his mask gleaming in the sun. His voice rang out over the chaos. "Seize them! Bring me the human alive! The princess must not escape." But Elora was already gone, running beside the stranger who had risked everything for her. Her heart beat with fear, but also with something new. For the first time, she felt the spark of hope. And for Daniel, the choice had been made. He had stepped into the fire. There was no turning back. The streets of Sereth twisted like a maze, with bridges stretching from tower to tower and alleys that ran deep into the shadow of crystal walls. Daniel and Elora ran together, their steps echoing as shouts rang behind them. The council guards had spread into the streets, their crystal armor flashing in the light of the twin suns. Daniel led the way, though he had never been in this part of the city before. He trusted his instincts and his memory from wandering through Sereth earlier. He darted into a narrow path, pulling Elora with him. Her royal robe slowed her, the long fabric catching on sharp corners. Daniel stopped, pulled out a small blade from his pack, and cut the bottom half of her robes. "You will move faster like this," he said. Elora looked at him with surprise. No servant had ever dared to cut the royal fabric of her clothes. But now she only nodded. She could feel the truth in his words. She no longer had time to care about titles or silk. They hurried deeper into the maze. Above them, crystal drones hummed through the air, searching the streets with beams of light. Daniel pulled Elora into a covered market, where stalls of strange fruit and glowing minerals stood in rows. The sellers watched in silence as the pair rushed through. Some looked away, pretending not to see. Others gave a nod of quiet respect. The soldiers entered the market moments later, their boots heavy on the stone. Daniel guided Elora between the stalls and slipped through a small door into the back. They emerged in another alley, but the drones were closing in. Elora stopped, her chest rising and falling. "They will not stop. You risk your life for me, but why? You are not one of us." Daniel turned to her, his face set with determination. "Because what they are doing is wrong. Where I come from, we believe in standing for what is right, even when the cost is high. I could not watch them end you like that. She stared at him, searching his eyes. For the first time, she saw no fear, no selfish motive. Only resolve. She gave a small nod and said, "Then I will trust you." The sound of marching feet grew louder. Daniel grabbed her hand again. "We keep moving." They climbed a set of stairs that led to a high sky bridge. From here, the whole city spread below them, shining towers and wide plazas filled with citizens still murmuring about the escape. The bridge was long and narrow, open to the air. A strong wind blew across it, carrying the distant cry of alarms. Halfway across, a squad of guards appeared at the far end. Their crystal spears glowed as they advanced. Behind them, more soldiers approached from the side they had come from. "We are trapped," Elora whispered. Daniel scanned the bridge. His eyes caught a service hatch in the floor of crystal near the center. He rushed to it, knelt, and used his cutter tool to burn through the lock. The hatch opened, revealing a narrow shaft that led into the underworks of the bridge. "Go," he told her. Elora hesitated only a moment before climbing down into the shaft. Daniel followed, pulling the hatch closed just as the guards reached the center. They searched the bridge but found no trace. Inside the shaft, it was dark and hot, filled with the hum of energy lines running through the crystal. Daniel's voice echoed softly. "Stay close. These tunnels connect most of the towers. We can lose them in here." They crawled forward, sometimes climbing down ladders, sometimes squeezing through narrow gaps. Elora struggled with the rough walls, her hands scratched and her breath short, but she pushed on. Daniel moved with steady focus, always looking for a path. At last, they reached another hatch. Daniel opened it and peered out. They were now in the lower levels of the city, where the poor lived in crowded quarters. The air smelled of smoke and steam. People here did not look at them with fear. Instead, some whispered the princess's name with awe. "Is it true?" a young alien boy asked. "The princess escaped." Daniel raised a hand to silence him. "Keep quiet." The boy nodded quickly, his eyes wide with excitement. Elora looked around. "They know me here. My mother often walked these streets before the council took her power. If there is hope anywhere, it is here." Word spread fast. As Daniel and Elora moved through the lower streets, more people began to follow at a distance. Not openly, but enough to make Daniel realize they were not alone. Still, danger was near. The council had unleashed hunting drones that flew low, scanning for the princess's life sign. One passed overhead, its red beam sweeping across the street. Daniel pulled Elora into a shadowed doorway just in time. The beam passed over the crowd, but the drone did not see them. They waited until it was gone, then continued moving. By nightfall, they reached an abandoned workshop on the edge of the city. The place smelled of rust and old oil, but it was empty and safe for the moment. Daniel sealed the door with scrap metal. Elora sank onto a broken chair, her face pale from exhaustion. "You saved me twice today," she said softly. "First from the blade, now from the hunters. Why risk so much?" Daniel sat across from her. He was tired too, his muscles aching, but his eyes remained sharp. "Back home, I once lost someone because I was too late to act. I swore if I ever had the chance to stand between life and death for another, I would not fail again." For a long moment, Elora was silent. Then she whispered, "You are unlike anyone I have known. My people see humans as simple, fragile, yet you have shown more strength than any of them. Daniel shook his head. Strength is not about power. It is about refusing to give up, no matter the odds. She looked at him, and for the first time since her capture, her eyes softened. She felt a strange trust building between them. Outside, the city still surged. The council's anger grew as every patrol failed to find the princess. But within the dark workshop, hope flickered like a small flame. Daniel leaned against the wall, listening to the distant sound of alarms. They will not stop. Tomorrow we need a plan. Tonight, we rest. Elora closed her eyes, letting herself breathe deeply. She knew the danger had only begun, yet for the first time in many days, she felt safe. The human beside her had turned the impossible into reality. And as the night settled over Sereth, the seeds of rebellion quietly began to take root. Morning came with a pale light shining through the broken windows of the old workshop. Daniel woke first, his ears sharp to every sound. The city above was still restless. Distant horns called orders, and the low hum of patrol ships drifted across the sky. He turned to see Elora asleep in the chair, her head leaning to one side. Her face looked calm for the first time since he had seen her on the execution platform. He let her rest a little longer before gently waking her. "We cannot stay. The council will search every corner of the city." Elora opened her eyes and nodded. She was tired, but she knew he was right. "Where do we go? The city is theirs. They control everything." "Then we leave the city," Daniel replied. "Your enemies expect us to hide in alleys and basements. If we move beyond their walls, we may have a chance." It was a risk, but they had no choice. Together they slipped through the lower districts, where smoke and steam covered their steps. The citizens watched them pass. Some offered silent bows to Elora, while others handed small gifts of food or cloth. No one shouted, no one betrayed them. Fear still ruled, but hope was spreading. By midday they reached the outer gates of Sereth. The gates were guarded heavily, but Daniel had studied their movements the night before. He waited for the right moment, then guided Elora through a hidden drainage tunnel that ran beneath the walls. The passage was narrow, filled with cold water, but it led them outside the city at last. Beyond the walls stretched the wide lands of Thalera. The beauty of the world struck Daniel the moment he saw it. Endless plains of red grass moved like waves in the wind. Far away, sharp mountains glowed with silver light, their peaks covered in frost. Strange birds with crystal wings flew across the skies, singing sharp songs. Elora paused at the sight. She had not been beyond the city in many months. "This is my land," she whispered. "This is what I was meant to protect." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then let us keep moving. If we stay in the open too long, they will find us." They walked until the suns began to lower. By evening, they reached a desert of glassy sand. The ground sparkled under the fading light, but the air grew hot and heavy. Daniel shared the little food they had been given by the people of the lower city. It was strange fruit with glowing veins, but it filled their stomachs. Night came quickly. Stars burned bright across the sky, more than Daniel had ever seen on Earth. Elora pointed to a cluster of them shaped like a crown. "My mother told me those stars belonged to our ancestors. She said they watched us from above." Daniel listened quietly. He had no such legends, but he understood the comfort of stories. "Do you believe they watch now?" he asked. Elora looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I want to believe. But perhaps it is not the ancestors we need to wait for. Perhaps it is the living who must rise. They camped at the edge of a ruined structure half buried in the sand. It looked ancient, built long before her family's line. Daniel used his small cutter to spark a fire, and the two sat close for warmth. The night air grew cold, and strange cries echoed across the desert. Elora shivered. The council will not give up. They will chase us across every land. Daniel nodded. Let them chase. We will keep moving until we are ready to strike back. Her eyes widened slightly at his words. Strike back. You mean to fight them? If we only run, they will always find us. If we stand, we can choose our ground, Daniel said firmly. For a long time, Elora was silent. Then she whispered, perhaps you are right. Perhaps that is what my people need. Someone willing to stand. The next day, they continued through the desert. By noon, storms of burning sand rose around them, making it hard to breathe. Daniel wrapped cloth around their faces and pulled Elora close as they pushed through the storm. Hours later, they stumbled out, their bodies weak but alive. Ahead lay a vast forest of tall crystal trees. Their trunks glowed faintly with inner light, and their branches stretched like sharp glass fingers. The forest hummed with strange energy. This place is dangerous, Elora warned. The trees feed on the air itself. Too long inside, and they take your strength. Daniel studied the forest. Then we move fast. Inside, the air felt heavy. The ground was covered with shards that cut at their boots. Strange animals of light darted between the trunks. Once, they heard the growl of a large beast, and Daniel kept his spear ready. Elora, though weary, used her gift to create bursts of light that frightened smaller creatures away. Hours passed, and their bodies ached. But as they neared the far side of the forest, they heard a sound that froze them both. The hum of engines. Drones swept low through the trees, beams of red light scanning the forest floor. Soldiers in crystal armor followed behind, moving carefully among the glowing trunks. They found us, Daniel whispered. Elora's heart raced. We cannot outrun them here. The forest will drain us. Daniel looked around quickly. His eyes found a broken spire jutting from the ground, part of some ancient ruin. There. We climb. They scrambled up the spire as the soldiers closed in. Daniel pulled Elora higher, his muscles straining. At the top, they crouched low, hiding behind jagged stone. The soldiers passed below, scanning the ground, unaware of the fugitives above. When the patrol finally moved deeper into the forest, Daniel let out a breath. Elora looked at him with gratitude. You saved me again. He gave a small smile. We are not safe yet. But we are alive. By nightfall, they reached the forest's edge and stepped out onto high plains that stretched toward the distant mountains. The air here was clean and cold. They could see far in every direction. As they rested, Elora spoke softly. You risk yourself again and again. My people would have abandoned me. Yet you stay. Daniel answered simply. Because I believe your life matters. And because no one deserves to stand alone against such power. She lowered her head, touched by his words. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that survival was possible, that together they might find more than just escape. The mountains loomed closer with every step they took. Behind them, the council spread its net wider, chasing the princess and the human who had dared to defy them. Ahead, danger and hardship waited, but also the chance for freedom. The flight across Thalera had only begun. The mountains rose higher with every step, their sharp peaks covered in silver frost that glowed under the suns. Daniel and Elora moved carefully along narrow paths that cut through stone cliffs. The air was thin, and the wind howled like a living thing, pulling at their clothes and hair. Yet compared to the city, the mountains felt free. No soldiers marched here, no drones hummed above. For 2 days they climbed higher. They ate little, sharing the last of their fruit, and drank from cold streams that ran between rocks. Daniel's body ached, but he pushed forward, knowing the higher they went, the harder it would be for the council to find them. On the third night, they found shelter in a cave. The stone walls glimmered faintly with crystals that shone in the dark. Daniel built a small fire from dry wood he had carried, and the warmth filled the space. Elora sat near the flames, her eyes watching the shadows dance on the walls. At last she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "There is something you must know, Daniel. Something about my people, and about me." Daniel looked at her closely. He had noticed the way she sometimes hesitated when speaking of the council, the way her eyes darkened when the subject of the throne was near. He nodded for her to continue. Elora lifted her hand, and the light of the fire reflected off her silver bracelets. "My family once ruled Thalera with fairness. My mother, Queen Celera, was loved by the people. She believed the throne was a duty, not a prize. But after her death, the council took more power. They told the people they would protect the throne until I was ready, but they never meant to give it back." Daniel frowned. "And that is why they tried to remove you." "Yes," Elora said. "But there is more. Our laws are old, written long before the council existed. One law speaks of the life bond. If the heir to the throne is saved from death by another, then the right to rule can pass to the savior. The council has no power to deny it." Daniel leaned back, surprised. "So when I saved you from execution," Elora met his gaze, her eyes shining in the firelight. "By law, you could claim the throne. You are the one who kept the heir alive. The council knows this. That is why they want you captured as much as me. If the people learn the truth, their power will be broken." The cave grew quiet. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence. Daniel shook his head. "I am human. I cannot rule your world. I do not know your ways." "You do not need to know every way," Elora said quickly. "You only need to lead with the heart that made you save me. The people need hope, and they will see it in you. They already whisper your name. They call you the outsider who defied the council." Daniel stared into the flames. He had never thought of power, never wanted it. Back on Earth, he had been a simple man, an explorer, nothing more. Now he was being told he could sit on a throne of crystal and command an entire world. The idea felt heavy, like a chain. After a long moment, he said, "I did not save you to become a ruler. I saved you because it was right." Elora gave a small smile. "And that is exactly why you could be one." The fire burned low as they both sat in silence. Daniel wrestled with the thought, while Elora watched him with quiet hope. She had carried the secret since her mother's death, waiting for the right moment. Now the choice rested not in her hands, but in his. The next day they continued deeper into the mountains. Snow began to fall, covering the rocks with white layers. Daniel cut branches to make crude walking sticks, and Elora used her gift of light to keep them warm. The climb was hard, but the cold air felt clean after the city. One afternoon, as they crossed a frozen bridge of stone, a group of mountain dwellers appeared. They were tall and wrapped in thick furs, their faces hidden behind masks of bone. At first Daniel raised his spear in defense, but Elora stepped forward and spoke in their tongue. The dwellers listened, then lowered their weapons. They had heard rumors of the princess who escaped death. They offered food and shelter in their hidden village, carved into the side of a cliff. Inside the village, Daniel saw how the people lived simply, far from the council's reach. They had little, but they shared it freely. At night, as they sat by a fire, one elder leaned close to Elora. The people of the cities grow restless. Word spreads of your escape. If you return, many will stand with you. Elora's eyes shone. Then there is still hope. Daniel listened but kept silent. He was not ready to accept the role the law had placed on him. Yet he could not ignore the way the people looked at him, a stranger who had dared to fight where they could not. 2 nights later, as they prepared to leave the village, a scout rushed in. "Soldiers," he said. "Crystal soldiers march toward the mountains. They hunt the human and the princess." Fear spread through the village, but Daniel stood. "We cannot bring war here. If they come, these people will suffer." Elora agreed. "We must go before the soldiers reach this place." They left in the dark of night, guided by the dwellers through secret paths. Snow fell harder, covering their tracks, but Daniel knew the soldiers would not stop. The council had grown desperate. As they reached a high ridge, Daniel paused to look back. The village lights flickered far below. He felt the weight of what Elora had told him pressing on his shoulders. The council would not rest until either he or she was gone. And if the law of life bond was true, then he held more power than he had ever wanted. Elora walked beside him, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "You may not want the throne, Daniel. But sometimes the throne chooses its ruler. My people need you, whether you believe it or not." He said nothing at first. He only stared out at the wide world stretching before them, valleys and rivers glimmering in the starlight. Finally, he spoke. "If I must fight, I will fight. Not for a throne. For the people who deserve better than chains." Elora's eyes softened. She touched his arm gently. "That is all I ask." Together they walked down the ridge, into the frozen silence of the mountains. Behind them, soldiers marched closer, and ahead, destiny waited. The secrets of the throne had been spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The escape of Princess Elora and the human Daniel was whispered across the planet like fire racing through dry grass. At first it began as a rumor, told in quiet alleys and hidden rooms. People asked if it was true that the princess had survived the execution. Some doubted, but others swore they had seen a figure fly across the sky bridges with a human by her side. The idea was dangerous, yet it gave hope to hearts that had been silent for too long. In the mountains beyond the capital, Elora and Daniel rested inside an abandoned mining station. Its walls were cracked and its lights dim, but it offered safety. Daniel worked to repair a small radio while Elora studied the maps of her world. She was not only planning survival now. She was thinking of war. Daniel looked up from his work. His face was marked by dust, and his hands were scratched from the rough equipment. "The radio is weak, but it might pick up signals from the capital," he said. Elora nodded. "If we hear their movements, we can stay ahead of them." "But Daniel, it is not enough to hide. We cannot keep running forever." He frowned. "I know. But what do you want to do? Go back and walk into their trap?" Elora stood and placed her hand on the cracked wall. Her eyes were steady. "There is an old law. I told you before. The one who saves the life of a rightful heir may sit on the throne. You saved me. The council will not accept it, but the people might. If they see strength, if they see hope, they will rise. Daniel shook his head slowly. I am only one man, and not even from this world. Why would they trust me? Because you did what no one else dared, she said firmly. You stood alone against the council's guards. You had no army, no shield, yet you acted. That is what they need to see. For a long moment Daniel said nothing. He had not thought of himself as a leader, only as a man who refused to let an innocent die. Yet he could not deny her words. Something had begun to move among the people, and it was not because of Illyra alone. It was because of him. That night, a group of shadowed figures approached the station. Daniel was the first to hear their steps. He lifted a piece of broken metal, ready to fight, but Illyra stopped him. She recognized the pattern of their steps. When the figures entered, they lowered their hoods and revealed themselves as citizens of the capital. One of them, a tall woman with silver eyes, bowed to Illyra. Princess, we heard of your escape. We have waited for this moment. The council thinks they are eternal, but the people grow tired of their chains. Daniel watched as the others knelt. He felt the weight of their stares on him. One of the men spoke. And you are the human who saved her. Some call you reckless. Others call you brave. We call you necessary. It was the first time Daniel understood how deeply his actions had touched this world. The rebels explained that more citizens were ready to fight. They needed a symbol to gather around. Illyra's return gave them that symbol, but Daniel's defiance gave them courage. Together, they planned small strikes against the council's guards. Over the next days, Daniel and Illyra moved in secret from one hidden place to another. They met miners, traders, and scholars who whispered their loyalty. Each person carried scars of council rule, heavy taxes, forbidden speech, lost family. With every meeting, Daniel's doubt faded. He realized he was no longer an outsider looking in. He was part of their struggle. The first strike came in the industrial quarter of the capital. The council stored weapons there, guarded by tall machines. Daniel used human creativity to outsmart them. Instead of fighting head-on, he rigged simple traps with wires and fuel tanks. The guards marched into the quarter expecting fear, but instead found chaos as their machines toppled and their supply lines burned. The people cheered from the shadows, their voices rising louder than before. The council was shaken. They had thought the princess dead and the human powerless. Now they faced something they could not control. Inside their chamber, the council leaders argued. One shouted, "This rebellion must be crushed before it spreads further." Another warned, "If we kill the princess again and fail, the people will never forgive us." In the mining station, Daniel sat with Illyra after the strike. His chest was tired from running, but his spirit felt alive. Illyra looked at him with a quiet smile. "Do you see it now? You are more than a rescuer. You are a spark. Sparks grow into flames." Daniel sighed. "And flames burn everything in their path. I only hope we burn the right things." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "With me at your side, we will guide the fire. We will not let it consume the innocent." As the rebellion grew, the council responded with harsher force. Patrols increased. Drones searched every mountain and forest. But the more they pushed, the more people turned against them. Whispers became open voices. Small crowds began to chant the princess's name in daylight. Daniel saw it with his own eyes one evening. A group of children painted his likeness on a wall with bright colors, showing a human lifting the princess away from chains. He laughed at the sight, but inside he felt the weight of their trust. One night, while resting by the fire, Ilaro looked at the stars above. My mother once told me that true rulers are not chosen by crowns, but by hearts. Daniel, many hearts already follow you. He stared at the flames, thinking of Earth, of the mission that had failed, of the life he had lost. Now a new path lay before him, one he had never expected. Then we cannot stop here, he said. We must go back to the capital. We must face them. Ilara's eyes shone with resolve. Yes. The throne must be taken back, not for me, not for you, but for all of Thalara. The night was filled with silence after that, but it was the silence before a storm. The rebellion had begun, and there was no turning back. The night before their return, the wind carried a chill across the mountain paths. Daniel and Ilara sat beside a small fire in a hidden valley, listening to the distant hum of the city far below. The capital of Sereth sprawled like a jeweled city under the twin suns, its crystal towers glinting even in the fading moonlight. The council had grown careless in their confidence, believing the princess dead and the human powerless. Daniel tightened the straps on his makeshift pack. Tomorrow we face them. I won't lie, Ilara. It will be dangerous. They will try everything to stop us. Ilara nodded, her expression calm. I know. But we cannot wait any longer. The people are ready. They need a leader who will stand for them. And you have already shown them that courage is possible. They moved through the shadows before sunrise, taking paths that only the locals knew. The underground tunnels of the capital offered a secret way in. Daniel had memorized these paths during his first days in the city. It was risky, but the council would not expect them to use the old tunnels, hidden beneath the streets and forgotten by many. As dawn broke, they emerged in a narrow alley near the heart of the city. Smoke from distant fires curled into the sky. Word of the rebellion had spread. Crowds gathered quietly in the streets, watching as the human and the princess appeared. Daniel felt the weight of their eyes, but it was not fear, it was trust. They moved carefully toward the central square, where the council held its chamber. Daniel noticed that patrols were fewer than expected. Many guards had been reassigned to other districts, trying to control unrest. The city itself had begun to rise against them. Ilara spoke softly, her eyes fixed on the distant council tower. This is where it begins. We will not kill unless we must. We fight to reclaim hope, not for revenge. Daniel nodded. He had never fought in a war, but he understood the importance of every step. The rebels they had gathered over the past weeks now joined them quietly, slipping from the shadows. Farmers, miners, merchants, and even city children, ordinary citizens who had been silent for too long, were now their allies. The first clash came at the central bridge, where a squad of council enforcers attempted to block their path. Daniel led the advance. Using tactics learned from his own experience, he created obstacles from debris and narrow passages, forcing the soldiers into tight spaces. The rebels moved with surprising skill, striking only to disarm. The enforcers were shocked at the coordination and courage of ordinary citizens. Ilara followed closely, her hands glowing with bursts of light that scattered enemies without harming the streets around them. People watching from balconies and windows began to cheer. The council's authority seemed to falter with each step the group took forward. By midday, they reached the council chamber. Its doors were tall and carved with ancient runes, designed to intimidate. Daniel paused, knowing the council's strongest guards would be inside. Ilara placed a hand on his arm. We stand together, she said. He took a deep breath. Together. The doors opened, and a wave of crystal soldiers rushed out. Daniel and the rebels met them with strategy rather than strength. They funneled the guards into narrow hallways, where the numbers worked against the enforcers. Elora moved beside Daniel, her light disarming many and forcing others to retreat. The battle raged through the streets and corridors of the council tower. Citizens watched from the edges, inspired by every success of the human and the princess. Murmurs grew louder, hope was returning, and the people began to realize they could stand against the council. Inside the chamber, the council leaders watched through a crystal window. They could not believe the progress made by a human and his followers. How is this possible? One whispered. The princess was to be dead. The streets were loyal. How can a single human lead so many? Daniel did not stop for questions. He moved swiftly, guarding Elora as they reached the top of the tower. The final guards, elite enforcers trained to protect the chamber, advanced with precision. But Daniel's courage was contagious. The rebels pressed forward, and even the guards hesitated as citizens outside joined in chants, their voices shaking the tower. Elora stepped forward to the council podium, her hand raised. The people of Thalera have spoken, she declared. The council has ruled in fear for too long. This city belongs to its citizens. No longer will it be controlled by lies and chains. The enforcers froze. Daniel stood beside her, his spear ready but lowered in respect. He had no desire to kill those who were willing to surrender. The council leader, masked in silver, stepped forward. You are not the ruler. The law belongs to the council. Elora's voice rang strong. You forget the oldest law of Thalera, the life bond. He saved my life. By law, he has the right to guide this world, and by the courage he has shown, he has earned the trust of the people. Your power is ended. The citizens outside erupted in cheers. Soldiers who had once obeyed the council quietly laid down their weapons, seeing that the people's loyalty had shifted. One by one, the enforcers surrendered, bowing to the new order. Daniel lowered his spear, feeling the weight of victory settle in his chest. He looked around at the citizens, all faces filled with hope. Elora stood beside him, proud yet humble, her eyes glowing with quiet strength. Together, they had achieved what seemed impossible. For the first time in many years, the city was free. The council's chains were broken, not by war alone, but by courage, loyalty, and the bravery of those who refused to bow. As the sun set behind the towers, Daniel and Elora stepped onto the balcony of the council chamber. Below them, the people of Sereth gathered, cheering and waving. Elora turned to Daniel. You have shown more than strength, she said. You have shown them the heart of a true leader. I cannot take this from you. The law gives you the right, and the people have chosen their hope. Daniel shook his head, his voice low but firm. I did not come here to rule. I came to save a life. But now, I will do what is right for this world. Together, they raised their hands to the crowd. The city erupted with sound, no longer of fear, but of freedom. The rebellion had succeeded, the council defeated, and the future of Thalera rested in the hands of those who had shown the courage to act when no one else would. The story of the human and the princess would be told for generations, a tale of hope, loyalty, and the spark that could change the fate of an entire world. The city of Sereth had never felt so alive. The crystal towers reflected the twin suns, scattering colors across the streets where people celebrated. Banners of the old council had been replaced with the symbols of freedom, and the air carried the hum of hope. Daniel stood beside Princess Elora on the balcony of the council chamber, looking down at the citizens who had come together to reclaim their city. Elora turned to him, her eyes bright. "The people have chosen. You saved my life. By the law of Thalora, you have the right to guide this world. Will you take the throne?" Daniel looked out over the crowd, feeling the weight of what she asked. He had never sought power, never imagined ruling a world far from his own. And yet, he had saved lives, inspired courage, and helped the people rise against oppression. For a moment, he felt unsure if he could bear the responsibility. "I did not come here to rule," he said softly. "I came to save a life. But if taking the throne is what keeps this world safe, then I will do it not for glory, but for the people." Elora smiled. "Then let it begin." The ceremony was simple yet powerful. Citizens gathered in the central square, their faces glowing with excitement and relief. The council chamber's doors opened, and Daniel stepped forward, flanked by Elora and the leaders of the rebellion. Elora spoke first, her voice carrying through the square. For too long, Thalora was ruled by fear. The council sought to control, not to serve. Today, we choose a new path. One of justice, courage, and hope. And in that choice, we honor the human who saved the heir to the throne, showing us the strength in standing for what is right. The crowd erupted in cheers. People waved hands, held up signs of loyalty, and sang songs that had been forbidden for years. Daniel felt their energy fill him. He realized that ruling was not about power, but about responsibility, about guiding the people toward a future where they could live free. He turned to Elora. "I cannot do this alone. You have been brave, wise, and just. The throne is yours too, in every way that matters. Together, we can lead." Elora's smile widened. "Then we lead together." The two of them stepped forward, touching the ceremonial pedestal at the center of the square. It glowed with ancient light, responding to the life bond that had been formed between them. Citizens watched as the energy spread, washing over the streets and buildings. It was a sign not of magic, but of unity, the human and the princess, together, symbolizing courage, loyalty, and the strength to change the world. In the days that followed, Daniel and Elora worked to rebuild the city. Soldiers who had served the council were offered positions in public service, provided they would serve with honor and respect. Citizens who had hidden for years came forward to share knowledge, rebuild homes, and repair the streets. The city grew stronger each day, not through fear, but through cooperation. Daniel spent much time learning about the culture of Thalora. Elora guided him, teaching him the laws, the traditions, and the history of her people. He discovered their values of fairness, respect, and courage, and he applied what he knew from his own world: creativity, problem solving, and the belief that one person could inspire many. Together, they became a team the citizens could trust. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Daniel and Elora walked along a bridge overlooking the city. The streets below were filled with light, music, and laughter. For the first time since his arrival, Daniel felt a true sense of belonging. "You have done more than I imagined," Elora said softly. "The people of Thalora see hope now because of you." Daniel looked at her. "We did this together. You led when it mattered. You gave people the courage to rise. I only helped them see what was already there." Elora smiled and took his hand. "Then we will continue together. Not as ruler and subject, but as partners, guiding this world toward a brighter future." The months that followed were filled with challenges. Resources had to be restored, the council's former influence dismantled, and trust rebuilt between the people. Daniel applied his practical thinking to solve problems the council had ignored for decades, while Illyra inspired loyalty and courage. They listened to the citizens, made decisions together, and faced threats with strategy and care. Rebels who had once hidden in fear became teachers, builders, and leaders. Soldiers who had obeyed the council's commands were trained to protect rather than intimidate. The city learned that strength was not about fear, but about respect and fairness. One morning, Daniel stood in the central square, watching children play on the streets and workers repairing buildings. Illyra came beside him, her face glowing with satisfaction. "Look at them. They are free because we chose to act." "Because you chose to act." Daniel nodded. "Freedom is not given. It is earned. And now it belongs to them." Illyra leaned closer. "Do you ever regret coming to Thalera?" He shook his head. "Never. I came here as a stranger, and I found a place where I could do what mattered most. I found a people who needed hope, and a friend who showed me courage in every step." The sun rose behind them, casting light across the city. Daniel realized that the throne was more than a seat or a law. It was a promise to guide, protect, and serve. And he would keep that promise, with Illyra by his side. As the city celebrated, Daniel and Illyra raised their hands together. Their story, the human who had saved a princess, the princess who had given him trust, and the people who had chosen courage, would be remembered for generations. Thalera had a new future, born not from fear, but from bravery, loyalty, and hope. The human on the throne had found his place, not by seeking power, but by standing for what was right. And the world of Thalera would never forget the day hope became stronger than fear.